Granting the media unprecedented access, police suggested William had fallen from the balcony, then his body had been disposed of. That scenario clearly implicated William's foster mother. But in the end, the search that began so confidently ended in virtual silence.
Don't let that clip from the new William Tyrrell documentary fool you. I don't think the Australian police or press are actually willing to solve his case. And it's not because they're evil or corrupt. It's actually worse than that because the problem is so common. So today let's watch the rest of this documentary and I'll show you what I mean. I'm Deception Detective, an attorney trained in statement analysis. This channel exposes lies and manipulation. So if that's your thing, hit subscribe. For exclusive videos, early access, and other cool perks, join the channel. Link in description. If you're brand new to this case, don't worry. This documentary will bring you up to speed. It will also recap the first part which we analyzed in my last video. I'll link that in the description if you want to watch it next. Alright, without further ado, let's watch.
Nothing about what they did or didn't find. But 18 months later, someone inside the police department broke the secrecy with very deliberate leaks to the media. One of the characteristics of this investigation has been the leaking of information in relation to the foster mother being the sole suspect. What's your view of that?
Those leaks, sometimes in homicide investigations, are done intentionally. Other times they're not. I can't comment on this one. I don't know who or what were involved in the leaking of information about the foster mother.
Dan, the leak of the brief of evidence going to the Director of Public Prosecution, suggesting that the mother was about to be charged, the foster mother was about to be charged imminently. What did you make of that tactic?
I don't know if it was a tactic. And you have to wonder who leaked that information, because my understanding is the detectives investigating William's disappearance were horrified that it got out, and they weren't expecting it. So there was someone potentially above them in the police force who leaked information about William's foster mother without checking with the detectives running that investigation.
If you don't know who that second guy is, he's a podcaster. He made a podcast about William's case, and he illustrates lots of my biggest problems with how the press and the police handled it. For example, here, he's either ignorant that the police routinely quote-unquote leak information to see how suspects will react, or he's pretending to be ignorant about it because a kidnapping police corruption story is far more interesting for a podcast than a mundane foster parents did something to their foster kid and covered it up rather than report it story. But the problems don't end with him and the press, because even the police in this case seem to have bent over backwards to ignore that obvious situation. And it's either because of incompetence, or in the case of the press, opportunism, because a kidnapping story is more interesting than a negligent foster parent story. Or third, it could simply be because of cowardice. And that's what I was hinting at in the intro when I said that the problem's far worse than being evil or corrupt. Cowards worry about what the public might think if they accuse parents of a missing child of having done something to the kid. And in the case of litigious parents like the McCanns or the Ramseys or these foster parents, they also just don't want to get sued. But incompetence and cowardice only explain so much. For example, they wouldn't explain why this podcaster is more concerned about who leaked the information about the foster mother rather than what the information was, nor does it explain what he says next. Listen closely to this part and then I'll tell you what I think is going on.
That investigation.
Are you frustrated with the police with this investigation?
But whoever the source of the leak was, and the police have shown no appetite to find out, what of the evidence implicating the foster mother?
If the police want to say that someone was involved in William's disappearance, and if that person is William's foster mother, they have to be certain that all the other people who might have been involved definitely weren't. They have to actually be able to prove that. And I haven't seen the evidence that they can.
But have police effectively put the foster mum on public trial?
That detectives in New South Wales are now confident there's enough evidence to charge his foster mother over the toddler's disappearance.
By leaking details of a brief of evidence they claim could convict her of involvement in William's disappearance.
I think it's a case of put up or shut up.
Former head of the New South Wales Homicide Squad, Mick Willing, first oversaw the investigation into William's disappearance. The focus of the current investigators has been almost solely on the foster mother, that she knows something about William's disappearance. Has that been a mistake or a flaw in the current investigation?
No, I don't know whether or not other suspects have been focused on at all.
Based on what the current investigators have said publicly,
yep.
That seems to have been the case, that there has only been the focus on one person, one suspect.
It certainly seems it.
But it's not the first time the foster mother has been in police sights. Gary Jubelin, lead investigator in the case for 4 years until 2019, reported to Mick Willing. Were you satisfied when you were head of homicide with Gary Jubelin under you that he had properly examined the foster mother or the foster father as well and eliminated them?
I was satisfied with what he told me. Now, in lots of these cases, globally around the world, relate to people around, missing children. So I asked Gary and said, "Are you sure? Are you convinced that they're not involved?" Now, he assured me that he had investigated that line of inquiry quite aggressively, and I took him on his word.
Since leaving the police in controversial circumstances for illegally recording a potential suspect, later cleared, Gary Jubelin has been publicly supported by William's foster mother, leading some to question his objectivity. If I played devil's advocate, there might be current and or former police who would say you got it wrong in your 4 years and that perhaps you were too close to the foster family, the foster mother in particular, and that you did investigate it properly. And that you faced prosecution for your involvement in all of that as well. So therefore you are tarnished. Your reputation isn't solid enough to say categorically the foster mother's not involved. What would you say to that criticism of you in the 4 years that you ran it?
I accept people are entitled to their opinions.
Hopefully you caught what the podcaster said and why it concerned me so much. But before we address that, I just want to quickly knock out Detective Gary Jubelin. We focused on him in part 1. And I think he got this case all wrong because he's a homicide detective. He saw this as a homicide kidnapping from day 1. And after he started publicly accusing people of kidnapping William, it was really hard to backtrack and see things clearly. That's cognitive dissonance in a nutshell. Even if he wanted to see things clearly, he was already too deep. His brain would have made it hard to do that in order to protect his self-esteem and avoid consequences potentially to his career and potential civil lawsuits from the people who he accused. All right, now let's get to that podcaster and what he said. Remember, earlier I compared these foster parents to the McCanns and the Ramseys because they're so litigious, and if they are following their playbook, they probably also have a PR team. And if they do, I wouldn't be surprised if it's funding that podcast, because he's either so ignorant that he has zero clue how an investigation works. Remember, he suggested that the police have to eliminate everyone else on the planet before they can start looking at the most obvious suspect, or he's deliberately pushing a narrative that suggests that the parents are innocent and puts anyone who questions that narrative, like me, on notice. In other words, lots of what he's saying is straight out of a defense attorney's intimidation playbook, like focusing on how whoever leaked the information about the foster mother broke protocol and should be punished, instead of wondering what that information actually contained. And as I just pointed out, using that old chestnut of suggesting that the police didn't do their job because they went straight to the obvious suspect, rather than doing it after chasing down every red herring and wild goose. So if that podcast is being funded by the foster parents, we can add financial incentives to the list of reasons this case probably isn't going to be solved anytime soon, along with cognitive dissonance, incompetence, and cowardice. We're about 2/3 of the way through this documentary, so before we finish it off, I just want to give him an opportunity to respond to me. If he's anything like Bert Stellander or other people we've called out on the channel, I imagine he'll be down in the comments section very soon. Check the end card for my William Tyrrell playlist and part 1. If you want to continue this series, let me know by liking, commenting, and sharing. Until next time, stay true.